So, how old were you when the U.S. joined World War II in 1941?
I was 9 years old.
Okay. Where were you living?
In Jersey City.
In your family, how many siblings did you have, and how old were they at 1941?
I had one brother, and he was, let's see, he was 7 or 8. He might have been 8 at the time.
Okay.
Because he was probably 8 in October, and then I was 9, but I had a birthday in February in 42, which made me 10.
Okay.
So I would say he was 8.
Okay. So, were your parents involved in any way in the war or the war effort?
Yes.
How so?
My father he worked in the shipyards that built the ships in Kearney, New Jersey.
Oh, wow. Was your mom involved in any way?
My mother, no, she didn't do anything like that I remember. My father was also we had air raids at the time, and he was an air raid warden.
What's that?
So, well, he had to wear, when we had air raids, there were sirens. Mm-hmm. Sirens would go off. And we had to keep dark shades, and you had to keep lights off. Because if the enemy came, they would see lights and would know where to drop bombs. So everything had to stay in darkness. So my father would go out. He had to wear a helmet, and he had a band on his arm that he put on, and a flashlight. And he would go out into the street.
Oh, wow.
And he would have to keep the flashlight off, but he would be out there for just to safeguard people, make sure everything was okay, and if anything had happened, he was there to help. So he had more in the war effort in that way, and by working in the shipyards and building the ships. Than my mother, actually.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my mother wasn't young enough to be Rosie the Riveter then. They used to have signs, Rosie the Riveter, because even young women worked on the ships and everything. Mm-hmm. And they did a lot of that riveting work, and they was a slogan, Rosie the Riveter.
Yes. When the war was happening, how much did you learn or know about the war at the time, like as it was going on?
Well, I knew that you couldn't get nylon stockings. The nylon was used for parachutes.
Oh.
And I had a cousin at the time, or he was more of a friend of the family's, I think. I almost forget name. You could say a cousin or some older cousin. And he was a paratrooper in the war. Mm-hmm. And I remember the day that Japan attacked Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
And people were fearful that the Japanese would come and bomb us also, which thank God never happened.
Right.
But and then you have so much today to tell you about things, but we only had the radio, and just the radio and the newspaper, and that gave us information as to what was going on with the war.
So it was just the radio and the newspaper were your updates?
Right, because no television, no phones, no all the things we have today in technology. We had the radio, and we did sit and listen to the radio. As odd as it may seem to you kids now, that's all we said. We watch television now and everything. We used to sit and listen to the radio, and we had the newspapers. Now I was young, so I didn't know a whole lot, but we did have in school. We would have to get. They would have the air raids. Let me get back to the air raids. The air raids. What that would do when you looked out the window, because everything had to be dark. There were floodlights in the sky because it would show if there were any planes up there. So there were floodlights, and then after they were sure everything was okay, it wasn't all clear, and then the sirens would go again, which meant everything is all clear, everything is okay, and my father would come back in, and we could put our lights in, put our shades up. So we had dark shades, black shades that you would put down, and we had in school. Yes, they had drills in school. We would go under the desks, and we had ration books. You had to use. Everybody got ration books. So if you needed, I don't remember all the items, but I remember like butter, sugar, coffee maybe, and there were some items. So when you went to the store, you would have to give you would take a little coupon out of the ration book. You were given so many of them. And I don't remember how they distributed them. I don't know if they lasted a couple of weeks, a month, I'm not sure. But that's, excuse me, that's what you had to take to the store. And you gave those little coupons in. And when you gave that in, then you could get your item. Say sugar, for instance. They would give you that. I mean, you had to pay for it. You always had to pay for things. But if you didn't have that, because you couldn't get it. Everything was in short supply.
Right.
So they used the ration books. And I remember even as a kid going to the store and having to take a coupon with me with something my mother wanted. And trying to think if there was any other things that I don't think I remember anything else right now.
Yeah, besides with the air raids at home and school and the rations, were there any...
honey, I can't hear you.
Besides the air raids and the rations, were there any other major ways that you can, or general ways that you can think of how daily life was affected, whether it be at home or at school or at work for your dad?
Well, if you were home, the air raids usually happened at night because it was dark.
Right.
And during the day at school, when they did have a drill, like I said, we just would go under our desks, and then the drill was over with. But otherwise, life was pretty normal.
Mhm.
You know, you still went around. You still went about your business every day. My brother and I went to school. My mother, I don't think my mother was working at the time. But my grandmother was she was living too. She lived with us. And my father went to work at the shipyards every day.
Right.
And when the war was over, he was out of a job because they didn't build the ships anymore.
Mm.
So he had to go and get another job.
Right. As the war was going on, what were like the general feelings? Like, were you afraid, or how did people feel about the war and about life in general?
See, because I was so young, I guess I didn't have that much fear. I remember when Pearl Harbor happened. And I remember being outside with neighbors and friends, and as a child, to think of something like that happening, I remember saying to my friends, if they're not here, they, meaning the Japanese, if they're not here by Christmas, because this was December 7th, they're not here by Christmas, they never will be. That was my general feeling. But I was young, and I don't know if I could grasp the whole idea of bombs dropping.
Right.
Because our lives were all, I was born in Depression years.
Mm-hmm.
And they were tough years on people. A lot of people didn't have work or money or anything. And that's when my grandmother came to live with us, because she still had my mother's brother home and her niece that lived with us, that lived with my grandmother. They moved in with us because that's what families did those years. Depression years were tough on people, and we moved in together. So by the time the war happened, my uncle, he joined, but he was too old. He was almost 40. And he did stay in the Army for a while, but they wound up giving him an honorable discharge for it. But I only remember that you couldn't get the nylon. And I know, as kids, you just go from day to day doing what you always do. You go to school, you go outside and ride your bikes and roller skate and stuff like that. So it was more the adults kind of thought more about it.
Right.
But we all stayed safe, thank God, and nothing like that happened because, the Japan started it, and then we came into the war with Germany. So it was a long war, and lost many, many men, young boys, and there wasn't a draft then; they all joined.
Mm-hmm.
They used to get on in a line. I remember seeing lines, especially if you went to the movies. The movies those years, you saw, for like a nickel, you saw 2 movies, cartoons, and a newsreel. And I remember in the newsreels, they would show the young men online to join the service.
Wow.
And that's what they did. 18, 19, 20-year-olds, they all joined to fight in the war.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they did.
And,
So,
sorry, go on.
what, honey?
Sorry, I cut you off.
No, what's the next?
Oh.
What do we do next? Is that okay? What I've told you so far?
Yes, thank you.
More of that, you know, I can't remember being afraid. I think once it didn't happen where that we were attacked or anything like that. As a kid, I kind of settled down and I felt okay because I really didn't think that we would get any harm.
Mm-hmm. And I know you said before that information was received because through the newspaper and the radio. Do you
Right.
know how delayed the information was? Like when you would hear about something that had already happened?
Well, they were very good with information on the radio and the newspapers, which I didn't pay that much attention to the newspapers
Right.
because I would, look at the pictures on the front page and things like that. My parents always read the newspaper, but listening to it, they were very good with news coverage of the war.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw it in the newsreels when you went to the movies. That's when you saw where the action was in different places and things like that. Mm-hmm. And the ships and the airplanes, and that was more explicit than
Right.
when you could see it in the movies.
Mm-hmm. And how old were you when World War II ended in 1945?
Okay, I was a teenager then. I was, I'm not good at figures, Claire. Give me a minute.
13, right? Since you were 9.
I was, right, I'm 13, right.
Okay. And once the war was over, how did your life, or life in general in America, how did it change?
How did America change?
Yes. Once the war was over, how did your experience and life in your family change?
Well, my father had to get another job. For one thing, he lost the job building the ships, and which he did get another job. And I think life got a little better then. People were, the men came home from the service, and we got nylon stockings again. And I remember those, Claire, like it was yesterday. Because by then, I was going to be wearing nylon stockings. See, before it didn't matter because I didn't wear nylon stockings. But I was becoming a teenager, and I was going to wear nylon stockings. And I remember us getting new nylon stockings because my mother used them too. And those years, they had a seam up the back of them.
Mm-hmm.
Nylon stockings had a seam. So when you put your stockings on, you had to always turn around and make sure that that seam was right up the middle of your leg. And and they were the most beautiful nylon stockings you could ever see in your life. Always remember those nylon stockings when I first got them. They were beautiful. And we didn't have to use rations anymore. We didn't have to use the ration books anymore. Mm-hmm. So life kind of eased up a bit for that no tension of being attacked or anything like that. No more air raids.
Right.
And no more my father having to go out as an air raid warden and checking on things outside.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that was over with.
Right.
And life was pretty good.
Mm-hmm. And you were saying before that you'd go to the movies and it'd be the movie and the newsreel?
Yes, you would see 2 movies for a nickel. 2 movies. Newsreel and cartoons.
How often would you go to the movies?
My mother and I would go. And they also gave away free dishes.
Oh.
And or glasses, whatever it was. Between the 2 of us, we could get a whole set of set of dishes and a set of glasses. I always remember that. And my mother and I, my brother and my father weren't that much for the movies, but my mother and I liked it. And the newsreels gave you a lot of information in it.
Would people go just to get the
We would
info?
go maybe, I'd say at least once a week, because we get the dishes.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to go you'd have to go every week in order to get a full set, eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And we go at least once a week. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And my next question is, overall, how do you think that your childhood and later life was affected by World War II, and how did it affect your views on the world?
Wait a minute, you got to give me that one again. Just talk a little bit louder and just give me that one again.
How do you think World War II overall affected your childhood and later life, such as your world views?
Such as what?
Your world views and your opinions on the world.
Oh, you're giving me a tough one. Well, I think people learned a lot from the Second World War.
Mm-hmm.
And because it was they say war is hell. That's true. And when the war was over with, a lot of, just like any war, the boys coming home from it, some of them are injured. And it stays with them for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it did even when your grandfather came back from Korea.
Right.
I saw how it affects people after a while. You don't take things for granted because you never know when something would happen.
Right.
You never know when somebody else is going to decide to attack, or somebody else is going to do something. And ever since then, there's always been wars here and there.
Right.
And, nobody wants to see wars again.
Right.
But it does have an impact, I guess, on your life because you always remember it. I mean, even as young as I was, I do remember, as much as I could tell you is what I remember.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't think of anything else. But, the world, you think you'd learn from a war like that, never let it happen again, but, there were countries that just didn't learn from that.
Mm-hmm.
Always somebody seems that they're out to get you sometimes,
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
And one last thing, I was just wondering if you have any pictures or like items or things from your memories and from that time.
If I have any pictures?
Like of your dad and his uniform or something like that.
No, because my brother was too young for the war. My father was too old for the war.
Right.
And I don't have a picture of my uncle when he was in it, but he wasn't in it for that long because he was too old and they discharged. So, and like cousins and things like that, we were all too young to be in the war. So we really didn't have, I remember that one cousin, older, that was a paratrooper, but I never had pictures of him or anything like that. So I really don't have, I'm trying to think, I don't have any memorabilia, from the war. Only my own memories.
Yes, that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, honey.
Well, that's
What else?
everything. Thank you so much.
That's it?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I keep racking my brain because I try to remember to give you all the information that I could.
Yes, thank you.
I'm trying to think if there was anything else. When do you have to put this in, Claire?
I have to do my write-up and everything for Friday.
For Friday?
Yes.
Okay. I'm trying to think if there was anything else. Sometimes I think there's something else later on, But I think I told you all.
Yeah, I think I have, I've got a lot now. Thank you, because it's more about the different feelings and your memories and experiences, not necessarily like the different facts and everything. So thank you.
Okay.
That was great.
Okay.
Thank you.
So you're good to go now and put it all together, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, honey. You're not going to work on it tonight, are you?
Probably I will.
I think you have to get a little sleep now, right?
Yes, Grandma.
Oh, okay, sweetheart. All right, I'll talk to you again soon. Good luck with that.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
Those questions are entirely different than what Hope and your brother asked me.
Really?
Questions were altogether different, yeah. And your mother said, no, these are different questions, which they are, yeah.
Yeah, we have a slightly different project, I know.
So I can only give you from what I remember,
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome, sweetheart. Get a little rest now, okay?
I will. You too.
Thank you, honey. And good luck with that.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll talk to you soon. Love you.
I'll talk to you soon. Love you.
Thank you, sweetie.
Thank you. Good night.
Soon. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
It's just one small thing, but it's anybody who had someone in the service had a star in their windows. There would be a little flag, and not really the flag so much, but like a small thing in the window, and it would have a star on it. And people would put that in their windows, and that would let people know that they had someone in the service.
Oh, wow.
And the thing is, there's a house that I pass when I go to church, and they had one of those in their window. And I hadn't seen one of those since the Second World War. So whether they got it new, whether they had one from the Second World War, I don't know. But they had it in their window for a long time. Now I saw the other day that they don't have it in there, but they've had it in there for years. So maybe a son or something of theirs was in the service. Maybe he's not in the service now. I don't know. But anyway, that's what they used to put, and that's how you knew a family had someone in the service. Just a star, but people would put it in their windows.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, honey. I think that's it.
Thank you so much.
All right, sweetheart. Love you.
Love you too.
Okay, honey. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.